those guys are going to be 37, 38 come the next World Cup. So it is time for a refresh.
The question is, will they panic in the final? If you can get them under the hammer, you can make them panic.
That top order battle between Pakistan's bowlers at the top of the order, and they've bowled very well with the new ball, against Hales and Butler, is going to be crucial.
Hello and welcome to Outside the Rope, having a look at the Men's T20 World Cup final with Mark Taylor and Ian Chappell. Great to be back with you, gents.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Now, Ian, a pearl of wisdom from you last week. Let's have a look.
My fancy out of that, I think that South Africa, with their history, I think they'll make a mess of it somewhere. And I think it could easily be India, England in the final.
So you said the South Africans would choke against the Netherlands? Really?
Nostradamus.
No, I didn't have that in mind. I did think it was going to happen in the semi-finals. But, I mean, it wasn't a great prediction because if you look at South Africa's history, it's not hard to predict that they're going to choke. And if you go back a bit, they changed the rules. They brought in the Super Sixes because of South Africa. But South Africa in the World Cup, abysmal. Their record is
So
horrible.
what you're saying is they'll always find a way.
Yeah, you can't help
muck
it.
it up.
Doesn't matter what you do with the rules, you can't help it.
Oh, yes, World Cups for the South Africans' kryptonite. Mark, I'm wondering which one of you two is the saddest, the former Blues captain or the former South Australian captain? The Victoria was bowled out for 63 in the Sheffield Shield. It's their lowest total for almost 100 years.
Yeah, I think Ian and I would be both gutted about that. Yeah,
and they batted first.
But we'll put our national heads on and think it's not good for the game to see Victoria make such a low score.
I did shed a tear of laughter.
Oh, there were some brutal clashes between you and the Vics back in the day. I read you used to have to catch the train over to Melbourne, didn't you?
Yeah, when I started, we were on the train. I mean, Les Favell was our captain in those days. I think first time I went, I was 18, and we had to bring a half a dozen bottles. That was the entry fee. But before we even got out of the station, he was saying, oh, will that long-nosed so-and-so make 200 and we'll be chasing 600? And I thought, why the hell are we going to Melbourne? We're wasting our time. And to be brutally honest, the first time South Australia ever won outright at the MCG was under my captaincy. And I had 9 years under Les. So we never looked like winning outright in Melbourne.
Was Bill playing?
Oh, yeah, and the long
and making runs.
The long nose, so did get 200 probably.
Yeah.
If he didn't get 200, he averaged 100 against South Australia.
Hope you're well, Bill. We've got a rematch of sorts of the 1992 World Cup final 30 years ago. Isn't that remarkable? Almost on the knocker, of course, a different format of the game. But a very memorable night for Pakistan cricket with Imran Khan put himself up to bat at number 3 and they defeated England in the World Cup final at the MCG. I think Imran was man of the match too.
Well, was he Makram?
Was he Makram?
Was he Makram bowling around the wicket?
Right, of course.
Oh, superbly, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good cricketer. Yeah. I mean, I described them as a skilled rabble up against an organised team in Gooch's lot. And I actually said I'll pick the skilled rabble. And when I'm talking about skill, you're talking Imran Javed, Wasim Akram. I don't think Waqar was. Waqar must have been
Waqar
injured.
didn't play.
He was injured, yeah. But he had a lot of skill as well. But the thing that's interesting, and Pakistan would have been out of it except for a no result in Adelaide, which was against England because of the rain. The rain came.
They got bowled out for 74 in that game.
Yeah,
and got a point.
And England were just about to get the runs and the rain came. Anyhow, we get to Perth, and by this stage, Pakistan are virtually gone. And Wasim Akram is bowling a lot of no balls, and apparently Imran said to him in the dressing room, Wasim, I want you to just go out there and bowl fast, completely forget about no balls. Just get guys out. And Imran came out to do the toss. So I'm doing the toss. Imran comes out. Normally the player would come out in his cricket uniform.
Yeah,
Imran had a Tigers T-shirt, a T-shirt with a tiger on the front. And I remember asking the guy, I said, what's with the T-shirt, Imran? And, you know, he's got that really deep voice. And he said, I've asked my team to play like cornered tigers. And, boy, didn't they play like cornered tigers after that. Yeah.
There was a number of similarities, as you say, of that 92 World Cup wins it was 30 years ago for Pakistan against England that relate to this World Cup. There's no doubt about that. Chappelli talks about the point they got from the Adelaide game, which sort of got them into to the semi-finals. There was also New Zealand belted Australia, they belted us in the opening game of that World Cup. New Zealand played Pakistan in the semis, set a good total, and Pakistan chased them down. Pakistan went New Zealand were quite defensive in the semi in the field, and they chased them down.
Young Inzamam.
Mahak made 70-odd with the bat and got them over the line. So they were the side that should never have made it. They shouldn't have made the last four. They shouldn't have been in the final because New Zealand were one of the form sides of that 1992 World Cup, but they found a way of getting into the final and then played probably their best game in that final.
Amazing how history repeats. And, of course, an early exit for the Australian team out of that World Cup. Is that the one where did David Boone have to keep in that World Cup?
He did, yeah, against India, I think, at the Gabba. Yeah, and I think they needed something like 3 or 4 to tie off the last ball. And Boone, I think, ran someone out, grabbing the ball from a throw in the deep to run the last man. We won by 2 runs, I think, something. Yeah. So Boone had to keep.
There was a lovely story in the commentary box that day because Bill Laurie was on at the end. And he was yelling at the Indian batsman and he said, he should run like a whippet. And I was standing up the back with David Gow. We weren't commentating. And David Gow, with his typical sense of humour, David said, what, on all fours, you mean?
Oh, very good.
It was very funny, very funny.
30 years since the 92 World Cup. Wow. And, of course, Imran Khan in the news as well. So let's see whether Pakistan can channel him. We'll have a comprehensive look and a preview of that game shortly. Bit of news around in Australian cricket, though. Andrew McDonald, after this failure, as he termed it, in the T20 World Cup, says there will be significant changes or a refresh of the Australian T20 team. We don't play for 9 months, so that's probably understandable and timely.
Yeah, it's something we talked about on this program a week or so ago, Matt, that you've only got to look at Australia's top order. You've got Warner, Finch, are both 36. Steve Smith's 33, although he didn't play much anyway. Matty Wade's 34. The next World Cup is in July of 2024 in the Americas. So America and the West Indies and what have you. So those guys are going to be 37, 38 come the next World Cup. So it is time for a refresh. This side's actually played well. Yes, it was a failure that we didn't make the semis, but it's T20 cricket. It really is an on-the-day game. You've got to play really good cricket every day in this World Cup to get through. So, yes, we didn't play up to expectations. But that doesn't mean it was an absolute disaster either. 3 wins, 1 loss and a washout is not a terrible campaign. It just wasn't good enough and we didn't play our best cricket. But a refresh, some younger guys, and I think some slightly different thinking would help. I look at the sides that are left now in the World Cup, or say in the semi-finals of the World Cup. They're playing aggressive cricket, but they're not necessarily playing audacious cricket. I'm not seeing switch hits, reverse hits from the better players. I'm seeing, yes, a little bit of improvisation. Yes, I'm seeing the odd ramp, but I'm seeing guys still watching the ball, hitting the ball. I question whether our guys have gone a little bit too far with their thinking, trying to make the game harder than it needs to be. You look at someone like Glenn Maxwell, who's a fine striker of the ball. He's spending more time moving from a left-hander to a right-hander than he is just hitting the ball. Look at Alex Hales, how he bats.
Kohli.
Suri Kumar Yadav. Yes, they move around, but they're not changing grips. They're not jumping around. You keep the head still. You do some initial movements, and then you watch the ball and you play the ball from where it is.
The query I've got is why are they talking about the coach? I mean, the coach doesn't have... He might have very small effect. It's the players and the captain who make the difference. And that's what Mark's talking about. That's where the changes are going to come. And T20, yes, you need a bit of experience. I mean, every cricket team needs a combination. You need a few experienced players. You need a few young guys. You got to have young guys to run around in the field and save your runs, things like that. Experienced heads can get you home in tight games, but it's the players and the captain who win matches and lose matches. So all this jumping up and down about the coach is craziness.
The other news this week, an Australian Test squad to play the West Indies was named. Please, let's get the red ball back. Let's play some Test cricket. This is the Australian squad, a 13-player squad. No surprises, really. Scott Boland's selected. He's got a Test bowling average in the single figures, so it's hard to overlook him.
He may not want to play.
Just leave it.
Leave it at that, eh?
That's right. I guess the only one is Marcus Harris. They've included an extra batsman. I'm wondering if that's to cover for Travis Head, who in his last 17 first-class innings has made 291 runs at an average of 19. His last half-century was the Ashes Test in Hobart.
Well, I think the big concern about Australian cricket, and Mark's right to talk about what the future is for Australian cricket, but when guys like Warner and Smith are gone, and Warner and Smith have been a huge part of the Australian batting lineup in all forms of the game, when they're gone as very good players, who are we going to replace them with? And that would be, if I was an Australian selector, that's where my concern would be, because the easy thing to do in any form of cricket is to drop somebody. The hard thing is to replace them with someone who's better. And when you read out those figures of Travis Head, that points out the fact that this is the type of player that we're looking at, and that's the concern.
Yeah, and you said you can throw in Usman Khawaja in that, turned 36 the other day, so he's only got it maybe a year or two left in him as well. So there's our two openers, Steve Smith in the middle order. Our batting order in all formats of the game is, well, of course it's getting older, but it's getting to that sort of mid-30s range where you start looking to say, well, who is going to come in next? Looking around some of the names in Shield cricket, there's a Tim Ward I saw from Tasmania, he's made a few runs, Wiley from WA, Henry Hunt from South Australia. We're going to start seeing these guys make big runs in Shield cricket. They'll hopefully be knocking on the door, because I think Marcus Harris, yes, he's in there as a bit of a floater, but they're obviously hoping that this third iteration, I think it is, for Marcus Harris in the Australian side, will be a permanent one, that he can replace either Warner or Khawaja if or when they retire or are moved on, because he's already played 14 tests, only averages 25, hasn't done a lot in his test career so far. I think they're hoping that he might be a late bloomer, that he'll be that 30-year-old that slots into a spot eventually vacated by one of the two left-handers.
I want to bring up the Prime Minister's 11 squad here that was named this week as well. Now, normally it's a squad that's picked from players not necessarily in first-class setups. This is really an Australia A team that they've picked. Josh Inglis as captain. The other batsman selected, Peter Hanscom, who's had a wonderful couple of seasons. Henry Hunt from South Australia, who's coming on very nicely. Matt Renshaw, who opened the batting over in England in county cricket. The other one's Aaron Hardy from Western Australia. Now, we're talking about that he's a opening bowler and middle order batsman, a bit like in the same mould as Cameron Green. So there are a few coming through, but that's obviously who the selectors are looking at in terms of next in line.
And I see Aaron Hardy made 70 in a recent game for WA and got them over the line, a really low scoring game. But once again, he's probably more a middle to lower order all-rounder. Whereas I think we really need to see some top order players come through. Some of these ones from the 1, 2, 3 and maybe even 4 from a state level, who are making lots of runs to be belting the door down to get themselves in that Australian squad.
And I don't want 30-year-olds being successful. I mean, you just mentioned Marcus Harris, 14 test matches, an average in the mid-20s. A player averaging in the mid-20s in test cricket shouldn't be playing for Australia. Yeah, I mean, and you should be averaging mid-40s and the better players in the 50s in first-class cricket to get picked for Australia. And I'd want to see a lot more 18-year-olds playing Shield cricket and by 20 being ready to play for Australia. And you go back to Ricky Ponting, Michael Clarke, young players who were, you could tell they were ready for Test cricket at age 20. I'm not sure that we've got any of those guys. I mean, Cameron Green is, what age is Cameron Green? He's not
Early
probably
20s.
far out of it, yeah. But
Pekovsky's the obvious one. He's obviously out of the game again. I mean, there was a lot of weight and a lot of stock placed in him, but we just can't get him on the field.
Well, I mean, if you're a selector, how can you pick Pekovsky? I mean, you pick him on ability, no problem at all. But if he's had 10 concussions, how do you pick him? Because you're going to be the guy, I want to pick this guy because he's got the skill. Terrific. But he goes out and he gets conked again, and suddenly you're the bloke who picked him, and everyone's, hey, why did you pick him? He's had all these concussions. Very, very difficult, and that's a problem in Australian cricket.
Would you roll the dice on someone like a Wiley from Western Australia?
Well, I think eventually they're going to have to give someone like that an opportunity. Maybe not at Test level, but maybe in some one-dayers. On some of these tours, they do plenty of tours these days. Yeah, I can recall my younger days. I think I was only averaging at 39 or something like that for Shield cricket when I was first picked. Occasionally, you've got to roll the dice. You've got to say, that guy looks like a player. Maybe if we pick him on a squad or in a tour, give him an opportunity. he might prove to be a better player than he thinks he is. That was certainly the case with me. The other thing that I've said about Marcus Harris, which has always worried me, is the fielding side of things. I think in Test match cricket, you need catches. You need, and I know that comes from probably Chaps and I who are both slippers, but they're the things where you can add value. You can upskill yourself as a player and add to the team. And it's an area that Marcus Harris is not great at. He's either making runs or he's no real value to you. And that's what you don't want. If Marcus Harris is a great bat pad, as David Boone turned himself into be, or he's a great slipper, then he's harder to leave out. If he's catching everything or making a catch that wins you a game, then it's harder to leave him out. If you're not that sort of player and you are just a batsman, you are then judged totally on your runs.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, or not I think, it is true, a good selector, really good selector, sometimes as a player comes along, I'll pick on Ricky Ponting because he was an obvious case, but you look at Ricky Ponting for 5 minutes. If you've got half a brain, you know that's an international cricketer. Now, you need to know what's in his head, what's in his heart, but you find that out from watching the games. But some blokes don't have to make a lot of runs in first-class cricket. You say, we're going to pick him because he can really play. I mean, I'd put David Warner in that case as well, although they messed around with David Warner too long. But that's the point. Somebody has got to be good enough as a selector to see someone in Shield cricket and say, this kid has got it, let's play him.
Yep. Well, as you say, with a lack of younger generation coming through, maybe the selectors need to be a little bit bold in their outlook. Let's move on to the final. Pakistan versus England. Now, I can tell you that after Pakistan won here in Sydney, there was a sea of green at the airport, not just in Sydney, but right around the country. So I think there's going to be a rush on the MCG. Question for you both. In all three formats of the game, Shaheen Shah Afridi, outstanding. Is he the best fast bowler in the world at the moment?
Wow. He makes the grand final, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Who's the best on any given day? But I love the fact that, yes, he's got pace, but he also swings the ball.
Yeah.
Anyone who swings the ball at pace is hard work. I look back on my era, probably one of the best I faced was Malcolm Marshall, and that was towards the end of his career because, yes, all the West Indian fast bowlers I played against were quick, but Mako could swing it as well, and that made it twice as hard. Anyone who's straight and quick, you get used to it, particularly on good pitches. But if you're moving it in the air, as he does, you are always a threat. And you're looking towards the final in the next couple of days. That battle between him, Hales and Butler is going to be outstanding and could decide the World Cup of T20 cricket.
I think, particularly if you swing it back into a right-hander, that makes you a very good bowler. The one thing I've got about Afridi, whether he is the best in the world, I think he's very, very good. But like a lot of bowlers, if you attack him, he can struggle. And that's the query I would have about Pakistan. I mean, I know from experience, Pakistan are panickers. And the question is, will they panic in the final? If you can get them under the hammer, you can make them panic. So,
there's no panic about their play the other night, though. They were very tough.
They have days where they don't and they play really well. But if you can get them under the hammer, they'll panic. Trust me.
Yeah, they've got one advantage, though, from what they showed in the earlier game against India, where they panicked. No doubt they panicked in that opening game where they probably should have beaten India at the MCG, is that they've got their captain back in form.
Yeah.
Babar Azam making runs in that last game will do him and Pakistan's chances the world of good because I think he'll feel a lot more comfortable. Prior to that game the other day, he's top scorer at 25. He was in all sorts of trouble. If he'd have missed out, even if they'd have won and got through to the final, he would have been a much more nervous man. Now he'll be a lot more relaxed, which they're going to need to be because Chaps is right. They are prone to panicking in big situations and you don't need to be doing that in a World Cup final.
But they don't panic like South Africa.
Not in a World Cup anyway. No. Well, India got the panics, didn't they? Against England, they couldn't get a wicket and they bowled terrible.
But, you know, everyone's jumping up and down about India, but India were in a position where they had to get wickets. Now, is Axar Patel going to get you wickets on Australian pitches? In India? Oh, no, you won't get an argument out of me. Not on flat Australian pitches. And to me, he wasn't trying to get the guys out. He was trying to contain them. Now, in my opinion, once you're trying to contain a batsman, you're in trouble. You've got to constantly be looking to get them out. And that's what India needed, and Axar Patel wasn't your man. I'm delighted to see that wrist spinners are having a good a good tournament. I mean, I thought Adil Rashid bowled really well, and a good wrist spinner, particularly someone who spins the ball from the leg. You know, that's. I mean, Livingston wasn't really spinning the ball. Adil at least was getting the odd one to spin from the leg, and that was an advantage you had with Shane Warne. He could really spin the ball from the leg. That's, if you're a right-hander, that's not an easy ball to play.
No, I think India missed a trick in this World Cup by not playing Chahal.
Yeah.
I think they went with the combination which works on those lower, slower pitches is finger spinners are getting in there, bowling at the stumps, the ball holding up. And just a little bit of natural variation is what they rely on. In Australia, bounce and, as Chap said, side spin makes the world of difference, and India didn't pick their spinner. Adil Rashid, as Chaps rightfully points out, was brilliant last night. The ball that removed Yadav in the deep corner, it was an excellent piece of bowling. It was slower, it was wider, it was tossed up. He took the risk of going in 15 rows back at Adelaide, and he got the big wicket for them. So, yeah, I think they missed an opportunity. And Shadab Khan from Pakistan, he can do it as well. He's more of an aggressive leg spinner. So I look forward to seeing that battle in the World Cup, the two leggies.
A word on Alex Hales, who'd been in purgatory before this World Cup. He's batted brilliantly the whole way through. Magnificent knock in the semi-final. Some of those sweep shots, how does he... He gets it behind square and he hits it into the second tier. He must have the longest arms in world cricket.
Well, he was a sensible selection. Now, you know, you can say what you like about him, his character, and if he was causing a problem in the England team, you've got to go and sort that out. And that's probably down to the captain. But you've got to get it sorted out. But if you look at Hale's performance in Australia, in the BBL, it was very good. So that was a sensible selection. And that's the sort of thing that Mark's talking about when Australia looks ahead. It's got to be a sensible selection. And there are times, I mean, a good player to me is a good player. It doesn't matter where he plays. But occasionally you've got to find somebody who is really good in that arena. And that selection of Hale's, very good one.
All right, gents, who's going to win?
The team that scores the most runs normally, unless it goes under a Duckworth-Lewis system game. But look, there's no doubt watching the semi-final last night, you've got to think England are favourites. They've got better, there's no doubt about it. First game they played Afghanistan, they struggled, even though they won. Then they lose to Ireland. They had a dreadful start. Pakistan started loss-loss. So they started loss-loss. So both these teams started poorly in this World Cup, but both have improved. But England have gone from meandering through to now playing some really good cricket. As I said a moment ago, that top-order battle between Pakistan's bowlers at the top of the order, and they've bowled very well with the new ball, against Hales and Butler, is going to be crucial. But if England win that battle, I don't think you'll stop them, because I think they've got the players who are very expansive, can score quick, and as we saw in the semi, they'll go deep. They'll make 80s and close to 100s. So Pakistan need to win that battle if they're a chance.
Is Mark Wood available, or is he done?
He's got an elbow injury, which you could think might count him out, which would be a big loss. Well, I went for the skilled rabble in '92, so...
Going again?
Well, I think, I mean, T20, anybody can win, and I think on current form, as in they're playing very well right now, I think the two best sides have got there, but I'll go for the skill rabble again.
All right.
I think there's probably as much rabble still around, maybe not quite as much skill, but there's still a lot of skill in that Pakistan side.
Let's see if they can channel Imran Khan, perhaps. You'll be able to see the final on Gem Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. I think the first ball's around about 7 o'clock. Great to catch up, gents.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Enjoy the final of the T20 World Cup.